Let's resume. Kenneth. Oh, sorry, Paul. First round. Sorry. Didn't see you. Paul. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, let me pick up on the points raised by members just now. Public housing resources is very valuable, and we're in a dire situation. We should deploy different methods to try to accurately reflect the number of applicants on the waiting list. Now, first on paragraph 4.4. Now, at the application stage, applicants are required to submit supporting documents and documentary proof, but as far as investment is concerned, no evidence is required. And according to Ms. Wong just now, this serves to strike a balance so that the procedure can be expedited. However, if we can screen out ineligible applicants at this early stage, why can't you check for more information at this early stage as well? Thank you, Chairman. As I tried to explain just now, we need to strike a balance. If we're required to check more, definitely the time will be longer. We don't check them at the moment, but we do have a declaration mechanism. The applicant is required to declare his assets so that he can show that he is eligible. And we do have random checkings afterwards. If we find that their false declaration is involved, then prosecution will be initiated. It's not the case that we don't prosecute or we don't check the applicant, but we checked the applicant only at the stage closer to the flat allocation, so that we don't waste resources on applicants that are perhaps not very committed. Now, on assets, for example, equities, funds, they also account for assets, and they might change. So at the stage closer to flat allocation, another round of checking will have to be done anyway. So to avoid duplication and to streamline the procedure and to think from the perspective of the applicant and on the use of resources, we like to strike a balance. And that's how this mechanism has come by. Well, in fact, this more questions stem from this answer. We talk about prevention better than cure. We don't want to use stopgap measures. That's why we suggest heavy duty on tobacco. Now, you say that checking will be done at the flat allocation stage anyway, and these applicants are therefore left on the list. Now, the question is why no supporting documents relating to investments and deposits are required. I'm not asking for very accurate information, but this could have been done. Then why not at the early stage? Ms. Wong. Now, as far as applications are concerned, applicants are required to declare their eligibility. Apart from income, we also have access limits. The responsibility, first of all, lies with the applicant themselves. And as explained just now, right before the flat allocation stage, we will conduct another round of checking. So it's not the case that we don't have any checking mechanism. And we do have random checkings as well. Deliberately declaring false information will lead to consequences, such as we will prosecute the applicant. All right, we will come to random checking later. An applicant might need to wait for 3, 5, or even 10 years. Resources are so valuable. So perhaps a little bit time should be spent to ask for more documents relating to investments. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, we are not refusing to it, but on utilizing resources, we think that this is a more effective approach because we have manpower constraints in the section. So at the application stage or at the flat allocation stage, we are putting priority on flat allocation stage. As for whether we can consider this, yes, we can, but on distributing resources or allocating resources now, I think it's appropriate.
As Agnes has said, it is about our resources and our ability to collect this information, vet it, and check it. And the key point here is checking, because even if you submit a document, it has to be checked. It's much more efficient to check that document at the point when they're about to be considered for allocation. There's no point in doing it on a repeated basis. Having said that, of course, I think it is something that we should look at as we refine and look at the way we operate our application system. So we'll bear that in mind the next time we do a review. But I think it is about efficiency, and this is efficient.
Paul.
Paul, of course we understand that at the flat allocation stage or at the personal interview stage, you need to update the information. But the question is, you don't even require them to submit the document. Some basic information like bank statements, and these applicants may not have too complicated investment plans anyway. You might just require the up-to-date book record or bank statements, and you can see all. Why wouldn't you ask them to give this document?
Look at that. As I say, at the moment, it's not required, but we'll have a look at it.
Chairman, in the report, and I think we all agree that if we checked it at an early stage, then the success, well, perhaps I should put it this way. Now, in relation to false declaration, if checks are done at an early stage, the detection rate will be 35%. Am I right? If it's done at a later stage, then it's 2.1%. That means for false declarations detected at an early stage, more cases can be detected comparing to at the latest stage during flat allocation. So that means this can help reflect the actual situation in the waiting list at an early stage, so that we don't need to keep all the files. You don't need to you can clear some files at an earlier stage so that you can really streamline the procedure.
I'm a bit confused as to where the figures have come from. Could the honourable member perhaps point me in the direction of those figures?
Paul,
can you tell us the paragraphs? Maybe I can ask for the Audit Commission's help. I am looking at 4.9, Table 20, Table 29.
What this, if I'm reading it correctly, it shows us is that the number of false detection cases detected in each of the individual years, and then the number of cancellations. I'm not sure that the figures follow your narrative. That's my problem. Can I just say that the figures of false declarations will depend on a number of different factors. What we try to do is to make sure that when we do investigate cases, that we do not only just check on their original declaration, but we check on the actual data that they produce. And that's when, as I say, it usually comes at the latter point, the point at which we're considering them for a formal application. But I'm not sure that I understand the narrative that the Honourable Member was talking about.
Perhaps let me analyze it with you. According to this table, false declarations detected. I'm looking at the English version. I'm looking at the percentage for cases detected at an early stage. It proves that it's much more effective than detection done at the later stage, because of course at the later stage some cases might have screened out. So what I'm trying to say is if you can deploy more resources at the early stage to screen out ineligible cases, you don't need to weigh the resources so that the list gets longer every year, so that
look at that. However, I would point out that if we're deploying resources at the earlier stage, they'll come from our investigations at the later stage because we have a finite number of resources. And the fact that someone is screened out at an early stage doesn't necessarily mean they won't dispose of those resources and come back at a later stage. So even though there is screening out, even though there are false declarations identified, frankly, the real impact is at the point when they're going to be allocated their unit. That's where the priority should be. But I'm happy to look at this alternative.
Of course, I'm not talking about ineffective checking at the flat allocation stage, or it should be dispensed with. I'm just saying that in a waiting list, the figure seems to be quite exaggerated at the whether it's applicants on the QPS or otherwise. I'm saying that it takes originally 3 months, but now it's more than 6 months, and you can't complete the checking of a case. So it gives people a scare, really, for the long waiting list, and for ineligible cases, or for those with false declarations involved. I think if you take enforcement action as soon as possible at an early stage, those applicants might be deterred from reapplying again, or they might have been subject to enforcement action such that they dare not apply again. And that's how you make it more accurate.
And as I said, we're quite happy to look at it.
But you're prepared to look into it. So
as I say,
we put that into the report.
Please do.
Thank you. Paul.
Paul, another point is you checked 300 cases per year, and the figure, the number is too few. 120 is at an early stage, 180 at the flat allocation stage. So I know resources are finite. How about deploying more resources at an early stage? Will that help enhance your efficiency?
Agnes, please.
Ms. Wong? I think these are two different things. I agree with Mr. Chair that it has a deterrent effect, I mean, as far as early detection is concerned, so that the figures will not be inflated. But we need to consider the actual operation as well. At the earliest stage, when they submit the application forms, if we spend more time in checking everything, definitely the time needed will be longer, and the applicants might perceive that their waiting time is getting even longer. So that's about allocation of resources, unless we have extra resources so that we have extra manpower at the early stage for this purpose. I just want to point out the reality. So it's self-deceiving, isn't it? That's the reality. That's the Director of Audit's comment. If people submit application forms to you, and if you ask them if you need time for registration, when in fact in the interim you can carry this out. Well, I'm saying that you should do a proper gatekeeping job at the early stage, so that you don't need gatekeepers at the middle or the final stage. So how about at the time of submitting applications, and that's the time when the AWT should be counted. Chairman, I'll come to talk about the QPS, quota and point system. Now, for those below 30, these applicants are really having no hope, because the success rate at the moment is 0. So on the one hand, applicants think that they should file an application as soon as they reach 18. In fact, this is just an illusion, because they won't be eligible within 12 years, or they might become ineligible in 12 years. So why can't so can you set an age criteria, say after 30?
I'm afraid we can't, because there will be some people who are genuinely in need of housing, who are not graduates, who are not students, who have issues. We need to be able to pick them up. So I'm not about to arbitrarily put a 30 or 35. Our system is already very, I think, draconian in that sense, that people do have to wait a long time. It's their choice. What we will do, and we've already agreed to do this as a consequence of the long-term housing strategy, we'll look at how we can rationalise the list so that people are not staying on the list who should not be on the list. But frankly, I think there are people at the age of 18 who have to be on that list, and we should be able to deal with them.
We're talking about general applicants. Just now, PS was talking about special circumstances. In general, we only allow applicants above 30 to apply for housing. Can that be done so that you don't have a scare?
I don't believe that's correct because, whether it's a quota and point system or a young family just starting out in life at age 17, 18, 19 or 20, I think they should be able to apply. Whether or not they get through will be subject to all of the conditions and requirements.
Both are talking the same, half a glass of water and half
full or half
full.
Yeah.
It all depends what this is what they say.
Exactly. It's difficult.
Paul?
Chairman. Or maybe you wait for your second round back to Kenneth first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm talking about the QPS, picking up Mr. Porter's point. 2.35, paragraph 2.35. It's listed out here that for applicants under the age of 35, 30% of them were students when they put in their application. Maybe they were in tertiary institutions. Some may be postgraduate students, and 47% have higher education qualifications. 33% are PRH tenors, and only 30% of the applicants, of the general applicants, have tertiary education or above. Now, for applicants under the age of 30, they account for 57%. 57% is a large percentage. So members keep criticizing the HA and the Housing Department for not doing enough. It's really about this point, because there are over 200,000 people on the waiting list. And as some members pointed out, you are just scaring yourself, really. And then if you refer to Table 9, within 5 years, under QPS, those allocated flats, for those aged 30 or above, is at 0. They don't stand a chance at all under the QPS to be allocated any units. Of course, as the director pointed out, we cannot just exclude people over the age of 18 in applying for PRH, because there may be exceptional cases where there is a housing need. But I think in terms of the QPS, you have to consider the whole picture. Do we still give them points on the basis of the age of 18? Because many people might think, well, I don't lose out, so let's join the queue first. But they are wasting a lot of resources. Now you have to receive the applications, and there are some 55,000 applications that you have to receive under the QPS. So have you considered the full picture of the QPS, so that only those with genuine needs, even if they are just aged 18, that only those in these cases could apply?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a perspective thing. I mean, I could argue that if it's only 34% of students applying at the age of 18, then it means that 76% are not students. The problem here is that we have a system that allows people to apply because they may have genuine housing needs. What we need to do, and what we've accepted and agree with the honourable member, is that we need to look at the list and basically take out those people who will never be eligible. And clearly, then we can look at perhaps setting a 30 or 35 as an appropriate age, which we would look at this. But I think, as I say, I don't think it's appropriate for us to apply an arbitrary cut-off above that, because then we'd have to have special arrangements for special applications. It becomes more difficult. In terms of the the criteria we might apply, we haven't quite got there yet, but we'll bear in mind members' comments. We're also waiting to hear what comments come back from the public as part of the long-term housing strategy review exercise.
As Director of Housing, the two members just asked questions relating to 18, which and the point system they can apply. And if you look into the table 9, what your argument itself is not holding, because none of the age that the two members suggested actually being allocated for housing. So what they're saying that you should, it's not that you don't receive special cases under 18 and over or under 30, but you're actually creating unnecessary hassles and wastage of resources to process those applicants that automatically at 18 they apply. These are the points that the two members are actually pointing out. And if you look at Table 9, which actually reflected the whole situation,
Sure.
do you understand their questions?
I fully understand that, but I repeat my point. I don't think we would want to exclude 18. We think it's better to take the 30 cutoff as the criterion on which we will rationalise the list. It's a slightly different approach. There's no difference in perception of the situation. We're just saying that we don't want to stop them applying if they really need to.
Thank you. Kenneth,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to continue to grill on this point, because we are not talking about excluding people above 18 to apply. But when Mr. Prescott told me that in 2.35A, that 34% of the applicants, when they did the application, were students. That means 67% of those, when they did the application, were not students. But however, I need to point out that A, B, and C are not mutually exclusive, because out of the 67%, some may fall within this 47%, which means they may have higher qualifications, or when they are doing the application, they are already living in a public rented housing. This is not the argument I would like to accept. But the fact is, I think when designing the point system, you should give this incentive to people who are more eligible or who have the potential to move up the social strata. Maybe you can design a point system that is not positive points. Maybe you are trying to just encourage people possessing university degrees or already living in housing estates, or people who are between the age of 18 and 24 to not applying so early. I mean, you should try not to build in an incentive system to encourage everyone, every Hong Kong citizen who has reached the age of 18 to apply for public housing, because that is not the crust of the design of a housing system.
Director of Housing, please, I must stress the point. We are not questioning the policy, but we are looking at it from a value from money audit point of view. You are wasting resources in processing unnecessary applications. We should not have been there because of the incentive you give under your present system. So please understand that this is where we are directing. We are not questioning your policy. That will be the housing panel. But because we are looking from a value for money audit. Can you understand that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, in fact, the honourable member is quite right. People who are public housing tenants lose points. We actually take points off them. Because exactly for that reason, we don't want to have to encourage people. What we haven't yet got, and as I said, this is something we are definitely going to be looking at as a consequence of the recommendations arising from both the audit report and the LTHS, is should we have similar penalties applied to other criterion that exist in the list. Now, the only other two criterion must be, of course, age, clearly. PRH is already a penalty. And is there something else? Now, it could be education. Should we apply a penalty to education? So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. In fact, I'm agreeing with you to say, yes, this is exactly what we need to look at. It is something that we will be doing. We've had some initial thoughts about it. But at the moment, I have to stick to the line of 18 is the application year. Then how do we deal with the other part? So I don't think there's any difference here.
Okay, Kenneth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing you probably should consider would be that if these young applicants are living with their parents or their family, I mean, that should, warrant the points deducted, because it doesn't matter whether they're living in public rental housing, if they are already having a decent accommodation, and that is something you need to consider. But with your agreement, Mr. Chairman, I do not think I have any question on Chapter 2, but I don't know whether the other members would have a question on Chapter 2. With your permission, can I move to Chapter 3?
Yes. 聽問一問先好唔好啊？
Let me find out first.
Yes, please, on this Chapter 2. I accept that we can look at different criteria. However, just living with someone doesn't necessarily mean that the conditions they're living in is acceptable. And the problem is you then have to look at the conditions, you have to do a lot more drilling down into the circumstances. That's why we've applied the PRH as acceptable housing. That's the standard. So I'm not sure we'd be able to follow that last suggestion.
Yes, okay. 各位主打
Members, well, yes, though. Do you still have questions on Chapter 2? If so, then I will let you finish before we move on to Chapter 3. In that case, I'll join the queue again. Next, Ellen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The director, I recall him saying this at least twice. The audit report confirmed that this so-called average waiting time of less than 3 years is not wrong. Yes, maybe, but I think the key point is, if you look at it from the angle of the government, how many PRH units need to be produced and when they should be completed, then the purpose served by this as an indicator is important. But more importantly, for those waiting for PRH, you tell them 3 years, and they won't understand it's something so complex behind the 3 years, and that it only starts counting after they receive the blue card, and the first housing offer is when the clock stops. So either you explain it more to people, but when you do so, perhaps the residents will come at you. So I think the question remains. For this actual waiting time is more than 3 years, that's also a fact. And from the point of view of the residents, how long they have to wait to actually get PRS unit, that's what really matters. That is the elapsed time while waiting. They're not playing number games with you. So here I'd like to follow up on this point. Table 2 of the audit report, from the point of submitting application to the issuance of the blue card, that's about 2.5 months, right? Table 2, Director, may I refer you to Table 2, that's clearly spelled out there. And if I refer you to Figure 3, you see even clearer picture. The estimated time, the elapsed time while waiting the ETW from application to registered blue cards, 2.5 months, and then to first offer until the actual allocation, then you have to refer to Table 6. And here, what you see is page 21 in the English version. There's one case that's waited for 10 years or more. If you look at Table 6, ETW for general applicants on the WL after receiving first offers but were not housed. So there's one case waiting 10 years or more. Of course, this must be a special case. But say for cases less than 1 year, 6,242. Even if we take that figure, that means you're adding another year to it. You know, I'm talking about actual allocation. So it takes 2.5 months to get the blue card. And after that, on average, it takes over a year, roughly, of waiting. So if you then look at the actual allocation and you refer to Figure 3, you see this. Third offer, if the third offer is accepted, that's 4.12 years of wait. So my question is this. I think I have first put on record these facts. You can refer to Table 3 29% have an actual waiting time of 3 years or more, the ETW that is. And that means for those on the waiting list, I'm not talking about the non-elder, I'm just talking about general applicants. Out of 10 applicants, 3 have to wait more than 3 years as the actual situation. So this is serious, and that's why the residents complain. Now they say the director of housing is supposed to be credible, but then 3 out of 10 have to wait actually 3 years or more. In that case, how do we put the minds of these people on the waiting list at ease? I asked the director, but he really did not answer me. It's 2.7, para 2.7. Now, Ms. Wong said that in November this year, they submitted a paper to the panel on housing, that's Gen 2. There, that does not explain anything about the 60% in 2.27, per 2.27. So I think they really have to answer that. Was it the case that it was discussed by EXCO, so it's now become a secret, or what is the reason? Now, when I refer to Gen 2, Appendix 2, I don't see it. Now, this is important because if the residents know this, there are special cases that may lead to a wait of a longer than normal period. You say the average is 3 years, the ETW may be 4 years, but if they know that they don't fall under those cases, then they can be confident that they will be allocated PRH in 3 years. I think that's important. That's why I would like to ask them whether they're going to do it. Perhaps you could take this point first. Now, the paper you submitted to the housing panel in October, we didn't get the answers there.
Agnes can start.
Ms. Wong, in the document we submitted to the housing panel, it was in October. It was discussed on the 4th of November, and as at 31st of March 2013, well, there are about 2,100 cases that have been waiting for over 3 years before they get their first housing offer. And in relation to the 2,100 cases, we specially looked into these cases to find out the reason. And these reasons are covered by us previously. There are changes in the particular, there are rejections of the offers we're going to make, and also changes in the preference. And as to other reasons, we have already covered them as well. Perhaps the district they have chosen and the size of their households give us limitations because we don't have a suitable flat that meet their criteria. So in general, these are the reasons. And we were looking into particular reasons as to why, for a certain case, the waiting time is particularly long. That's what our analysis was. And, well, the reasons are the size of household, the district chosen, and it so happened that we don't have a flat that meet their criteria. That's a demand and supply problem. So it's a matter of demand and supply. If that explains these, that explains the 60% of the paragraph 2.27, Ms. Wong. Yes, these are the general reasons, and there are also special reasons. And we found, upon investigations, that there may be other special circumstances. In some cases, all of the factors we've covered are involved. The housing department should give us more information. Well, the public would like to get a flat earlier, then they will have to make their applications an ordinary one. So if you want to get an offer earlier, then you will just make your application not a special one. Alan? Well, for some of them, they have to sign a tenancy contract. If it's longer than 3 years, so what happens? I believe the director has heard us. For the waiting list, it's important because the applicants will have to make preparations about their housing needs. If the transparency can be enhanced, well, say for example, a particular case he's been waiting for over 10 years. If he wants to reduce the waiting time, then he will have to make his case simpler, not a special one. I don't know whether I understand it correctly. Director?
Actually, when we're talking about special cases, it's when we've investigated into the people that have been on the list, the reasons why we haven't been able to come to an agreement on a particular housing offer. The reason is special to that individual. It's not because of their application. In other words, it's their choice whether or not to accept a district or to move districts or to accept an area not quite within their particular location. They understand this because we explain to them when we, particularly for these longer cases, why it's taking so long. But I think you're right. The basic issue is how much publicity we give to this information, and that we will be looking at to see if we can increase the publicity. Because I think the more information, better it is for us at the end of the day. Definitely.
I thank the director for accepting my view. For the 1,000 plus cases, they will not be all special circumstances. If you give them more information, then people will make sure that they don't belong to those special categories that will render their waiting time longer. If you want to shorten the waiting time, supply of PRH units is important. Of course, when it comes to production, the administration says there is no land. Let me now talk about the picture painted by the audit. Table 16. We see the total number of vacant flats as at the 31st of March 2013 is 12,471, about 1.7% of the total number of PRH flats. And it's broken down into 3 types. Unlettable flats, 4,370. I have a question. For these unlettable flats, if you refer to Table 19, you will see a further breakdown. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And under Note 1, there are 7 reasons. Of course. Well, there are 618 flats that has been left vacant for 10 years or more. And 171 of them belongs to Category A. They are vacant housing for senior citizen Type 1 housing pending conversion to ordinary PRH. Why does it take 10 years for a conversion? Director.
Mr. Chairman, it's very simple. This was a scheme that we introduced to try to provide special units for senior citizens. They were converted from public housing, regular public housing units, and individual senior citizens were given individual rooms within the flat. The policy now is to close them down and gradually convert them back into public housing. However, there is no policy to force people to move out if they're already in occupation. And unfortunately, to be crude about it, unless they die or they get moved into a hospital, they tend to just stay on. So we can't really force them out. And that's the challenge here. We have tried to encourage them to move out into dedicated units within the location, nearby and what have you. But some people simply won't move out,
Yeah.
and the policy is to allow them to remain. So that one is a challenge for us, I accept that. It's something we're still talking about. And indeed, we do discuss it fairly regularly in the Housing Authority, because members are also aware of this one.
If you look at the row, 363 of them are 10 years or more. Vacant C1P flats pending conversion to ordinary PRH. Director.
That's something that we have picked up. it's the same problem, that these are units that have now become vacant, and we are in the process of converting them. So that process is ongoing. The challenge is that we count the vacancy within the unit. We need to change the basis of counting that vacancy, because of course if it's got 3 units for elderly people, theoretically that's 2 vacancies if there's only 1 person in that unit. So we need to look at that whole problem. It's related to this change in use to convert them back into individual family units.
有冇時間表啊？即係幾時會完成？譬如你話 A 嗰度你就話。
Any timetable for the completion of the conversion? For A, you say that, to put it bluntly, you have to wait for them to pass away. What about B, Director?
For B, we want to try and do the conversion within 3 months, I think, once we get the vacant unit available as a complete unit. But as for A, we can't really put a timetable on that because it depends on the individual choice.
哦，咁即係呢個我理解又係。
So my understanding is that for the 3P flats in one single flat, as long as there is 1 person there, you cannot take possession of that.
We have a family flat. It may have, say, enough space for 2 individual rooms, and we may put another room in. That would be 3 elderly tenants. That was the original objective. So that we'd be able to get 3 allocations. What's happened is over time they've moved out for various reasons, but there's still 1 person. And we can't convert that whole flat back to a family flat because 1 person's occupying it. And that's the challenge.
主席，我想再問。
I'm still talking about this table. There is one. 10 years or more underneath it is unknown. There are 598 of such flats that for some unknown reason they are vacant. If you refer to Note 2, it says the termination date of the last tenancy of these flats were not available in the DTMS. This is unacceptable because you have computer systems. Are these flats vacant prior to the computer system is installed in the Director?
To answer this one, please.
係
關於喺嗰個。
At the time when the audit report was prepared, when the audit commission was asking for information, we did our best to find the information. We have to find the file. We supplied the majority of the information. For the outstanding ones, in the past month, we have located the information. There are reasons, factors related to maintenance, management. So when it comes to vacant flats that are not allocated, there is a record. It's just that within that time frame, we could not find the information. So for paragraph 3.19, the 35 flats that cannot, that in relation to the no evidence or reservation, Director. That's right. Now you have found the evidence. Is it the case that you will still not allocate such flats and leave them vacant? Well, the problems have been resolved. Say, for example, seepage problems on the ceiling. It may take longer. Say for the 35 flats, 17 of them are in Lake Yun Estate. They're on the top floor because of the rooftop leakage problem. It's a serious problem. We have to do some work on the rooftop, and afterwards there may be a repeated leakage problem. So out of the 35 flats, we have a record for each of them. May I ask questions on 2 more tables? Table 18. On page 54, there is a pledge from the Housing Department. Well, for refurbishment, it will take 44 days. In this table, there are 5 flats. All of them take much longer than 44 days. Is it a management problem? Or is it because there are a lot of difficulties encountered, Director?
Mr. Chairman, I think the individual flats have various different issues, some relating to structural issues, water seepage, re-roofing, for example. I mean, those are all described in 3.14c. We have given an explanation. To be frank with you, given the vast number of cases that we process at any one time for refurbishment, having only 5 that have this problem, obviously it's not acceptable, but it's relatively well controlled.
But they just only pick up 5. Could be more.
Could be more.
Yeah.
As I say, we do investigate cases.
I mean, in
45.
private sector, this is totally unacceptable because even from the public sector, those are resources that could have been well used by people in need, but they're standing idle and vacant.
Well, they're not standing idle, as I say. They're cases that cannot be allocated because they're not in a fit state to be allocated.
But then the fit state is your making, not the public making, because it takes so long to complete.
Well, no. For example, if you have a structural problem, it will take time to rectify that problem. If you have a serious seepage issue, you have to find the source of the seepage, and you then need to apply waterproofing and what have you. Each case has to be looked at on its individual circumstances, Mr.
If you look at flat 1, that since September 2008, issue in July 2011, but works was not started until February 2012. Refurbishment completed date March 2012. It just actually takes 1 month to complete the repairing work.
Presumably, once we've got the equipment, perhaps Mr. Lui can answer the question.
主席，我想提供少少資料啦。
May I supply some information? For flats 1 and 2, they are in Yuan Estate, Yuan House. 2 top floor flats. As I said, after we have completed the waterproofing work on the roof, the maintenance team monitored the situation and found that in general, the water seepage problem afterwards has been resolved. But for 2 flats, the situation has yet to improve. Under such circumstance, we have to chase the contractor. When there is a seepage problem, we cannot allocate the flat because the new tenant will renovate the flat. So if it's not seepage from the rooftop, it should not have taken so long. But when it comes to such cases, we have to hold the contractor responsible. It may take so long. Alan. The last table, table 17. It talks about aging analysis of vacant flats available for letting. We see that from 1 year to 10 years, 887 vacant flats, but they are lettable. And these are not pulled under the express flat allocation scheme. Is it something that has to be tackled? Because if these flats are made available, the 470 of them, it doesn't involve seepage problems, they are lettable. And still, there are so many of them. 46 of them have been left vacant for 10 years or more. Is there room for improvement, Director?
Perhaps
Ms. Wong? There are 40 flats in Tai O in Long Tin Estate. They are not yet allocated, so we convert them into HOS flat. There are some in Tung Chung. The location may not be very popular, and for some flats, they are earmarked for clearance projects. Even under the EFAS, some flats will have to go round for a number of times before they are taken. We try to allocate them, but it's down to whether they are taken by applicants. We have to respect the wish of the applicants. Alan. Well, because there is a short supply. Look at 2.49, this paragraph. Well, there is one person who's been allocated in July 2010, but Even months afterwards, the name is not taken after the waiting list, and there are flats that has been left vacant for 10 years and they are not allocated. So you need to use the actual waiting time. For all these issues, I believe the director should consider improving on these issues. It's not just about having the same statistics basis and then juggle the figures. You should look at it from the perspective of the applicants. They have to plan for their housing, say for example whether they should sign a tenancy agreement for the SDU. At least they have an idea when they plan. But perhaps the housing department may consider using the actual waiting time in the place of the average waiting time. And tables 16 to 19 showed a number of figures and it painted a picture. Release the units into the market. For paragraph 2.27, the special exercise. How come in some cases the waiting time is longer? Because the applicants themselves will have to share some of the responsibilities, say for example the selection of a particular district. You have to make all the information available so that people will get a better picture to see where they stand. In some cases, because of ignorance, and not because of their own fault, because of a lack of information, they are worried. All these should be taken into consideration.
Secretary would like to reply. Chairman. Yes. Enhancing transparency of information. Yes. We've taken note of that. Improving the procedure on vacant flats. Yes, we'll follow up on it. But can we replace AWT with ETW? I think there is a difficulty. It all comes down to the choice of applicants, whether they accept the first offer. Let's say we don't have 3 offers. We have only just 1 offer. Then it will be easy to grasp the figures. But now the situation is that we have 3 offers. Some tenants might have been there in a district for a long time. We don't want to force the tenants to move to another district. That's why we have 3 offers. The first offer, or whether between the first and second offer, whether there is room for improvement, we'll look into that. Mr. Raymond Wong. Let's stick to this paragraph, Kenneth. Or would you wait for the 3rd round? I think after completing the 2nd issue, we can move on to the 3rd issue. Are we talking about number 2 or number 3 here? Of course, we're asking questions on number 2, allocation of flats to people in need of public rental housing. We need a couple of more public hearings. Just now, so let's focus on Chapter 2. Well, Secretary just now said that it's difficult to use ETW. You like to play with figures. The Secretary or the CS4A can come out and say that the average waiting time is less than 3 years. But let's be honest, for elderly people, how much time? Non-elderly, how much time? What about younger applicants? How much time? Let's be frank. Instead, you just come out and say, from a policy perspective, it will be 3 years. It's just playing around figures. You are technocrats. You understand very well what the problem is. Coming back to my question, 2.16. Just now, some members make this point already. About 2.18, 2.19. We agree with the audit report that the practice of including single elderly applicants in the general applicants in calculating AWT is not very desirable, because for 3.01 years, well, that's just the AWT, not the ETW. Now, the percentage is 14.81%. So we won't accept the Housing Department's explanation. It's just playing around figures. According to the Housing Department, it doesn't affect the calculation of the waiting time for the two separate categories. For table 2.8, table 2, table 3 is very figure 3 is very clear that the Housing Department is playing around with figures. You're just repackaging the whole thing, and the applicants on the waiting list get more and more annoyed. And that's our concern. There is a public outcry. There are insufficient PRH flats, and the 689 is telling lies. And you don't have a sufficient housing production. That's not the crux of the matter. We're talking about the value of money audit. That's the other issue that's incurable. That's why you're grabbing land blindly. Table 2 and figure 3. Well, very clearly, you get busted. According to the audit report, the average waiting time, or the ETW, is 2.9 to 4.12 years, depending on the applicants taking whether either the first or second or the third offer. From year 2000, applicants have been given 3 single offers on different dates instead of 3 offers in one go in the allocation of PRH flats. That's very clear. From the first to the third offers, the waiting time, the ETW, could be as long as 62 weeks, 1.21 years. So that's between the first and third offers. And what about the weeks that you promised? There's a great difference. From year 2000, have you reviewed this policy? If 3 offers can be given in one go, what are the pros and cons, Secretary? Chairman, the department considered this issue. Perhaps I'll defer to the department. Ms. Wong. Thank you, Chairman. Let's say we give applicants 3 offers in one go to the same applicant. That means we are going to lock up 3 units at one time. Each time we make an offer to the applicant, we give them 10 days to consider, because the applicant may need to view the flat, they may need to take leave to view the flat, and time needed may be longer, because at the same time 3 units will be on hold for one applicant to choose before we make another offer to another applicant. On the other hand, if we give one offer to one applicant at one time, then the applicant may take up this offer, and at the same time the 2 remaining units can also be up for offer for the 2 remaining applicants. And for a short period of time, we did try this out in the past, because supply was relatively sufficient, and we thought we could try it out. However, after a while, we believed that it would drag down our procedure, and that is why we returned to the practice of giving the first offer to applicants first, because might be coincidentally the applicant might find the first offer to his liking. So things can be expedited. We don't need to hold up 3 units at the same time. 3 applicants can consider these 3 units at the same time, and it will be fair to applicants on the waiting list. In year 2000, it was estimated that between the first and the third offer, it would be 9 to 12 weeks. However, according to the report, it's over 62 weeks. So, according to your answer, technically, you considered the difficulties in allocation. However, this is such a big discrepancy here. 9 to 12 weeks and 62 weeks? Please tell me. Very often we come across these cases. Sometimes they tell us that between the first and third offers, well, accordingly, it's supposed to be several months, but they have told us that it took as close as a year. So over 62 weeks, it far exceeds the expected time frame in year 2000. So And I think you haven't considered how this should be resolved. You just played around with the figures. I don't need an answer from them.
The number of units available at any one time. In the early 2000s, we actually had a large number of units coming on stream as a consequence of ratcheting up the production. But the other factor that comes into play, of course, is the availability of units within an area.
That's Donald Zhang's fault.
About any particular reason. I'm just saying that was the fact. I would say that the other issue that's important is where the units are available. Because at any one time, we may have more units, for example, as we do now in the urban area, and people waiting for the new territories will have to wait longer simply because we don't have enough units. So it's about the supply. That's the consequence of this problem.
Yuman.
Yes, Mr. Wong. Well, so in your answer, if supply is sufficient, problems can be resolved. Of course, this is an obvious answer. With inadequate supply, at the moment, we are trying to think of ways to improve it. That's the audit report's point. So the audit report's recommendation is that if the average waiting time for the first, second, and the third offer can be made known, then the applicant, as Mr. Leung put it just now, can make a choice, and this will facilitate your procedure. And you should do it, and this will facilitate whether applicants will take the first offer or the next offer so that they can plan for their lives better in terms of their work or their children's education. And things may also change whilst they're on the waiting list. So this is common sense. The longer time it takes, the applicants might, in light of this, decide to take this offer. The Audit Commission, obviously, is not stopping the Housing Department from encouraging the applicants to take up any offer. So from in paragraph 2.22a, the Housing Department's reply. Perhaps you can elaborate on your reply. 2.22a. In September 2013, the HT explained, and then the ensuing paragraph. Let's not dwell into that. So I think this is just empty talk. The Audit Commission says that the information to be disclosed will not affect the waiting time, and the Housing Department says accordingly cannot control the waiting time of 3 years. So from another perspective, if you can disclose more information instead of playing around with figures, that will be better, because once all the information is in the public domain, you cannot maintain your position of 2.7 years average waiting time. Why do you have to deceive the public, Secretary, Chairman? I think in terms of transparency, there is a need to improve the transparency. We're not deceiving the public. In fact, we have all along maintained that the average waiting time means the time between the registration and the first offer. I was a member of the Housing Authority and chairman of a committee, and I maintained the same position. What about the 3 years waiting time? We keep on explaining to the public. So please explain to me what is the pledge of 3 years waiting time. Please allow Secretary to finish his answer. In fact, this audit report let the public know the actual time involved. Well, we are happy to explore whether there is any room to compress the procedure. But as members also agree, if supply is not adequate, or at least not adequate in certain districts, some people might need to wait longer. Well, Mr. Wong, you can pursue this question at the panel on housing later. I'm just repeating what is said in the audit report 2.23, Table 3. In Table 3, very clearly. If the frozen period is taken into account after the first offer, and the 2.7 years is definitely not a real picture. 7,552 applicants waited for 5 to 10 years, and 15 waited for more than 10 years. And I asked the housing department at a panel meeting once not to take a rigid approach for these special cases. These are backlog cases. Now, my view actually tallies with the Audit Commission's recommendation, 2.26 and 2.27. In 2012, the Housing Department carried out a special exercise to investigate into those cases, 860 cases did not have valid reasons of the long waiting, or no mention had been made as to whether they were just omissions. All right, 2.32b. Now, the HD is currently finalizing a follow-up analysis of the housing situation of WL applicants as at end of June 2013, which is an update of the 2 previous analyses. I hope this information can be provided to the panel on housing. All right? Another question on implementation of the QPS. 2.43. The Housing Department gave a reply and dodged the question or the recommendation made by the Audit Commission on QPS 2.43. Now, coming back to 2.38 first, the current QPS gives an incentive for young people reaching the eligible age of 18 to apply as early as possible, even though they may not have a pressing need for housing. Under the existing system, when as each year of age increase, more points will be added, and the time of application also attracts more points. Now the university fresh graduates will apply for PRH as soon as they graduate. So, as mentioned by Mr. Alan Leung this morning, he talked about 18-year-old applicants. Or have I digressed? Okay, please give us your view, Mr. Wong. Let's say if you adopt the 8% approach capped at 2,000 cases, how many years does it take to cater for the needs of those applicants under QPS? Have you conducted this analysis? You're talking about the overall figure and the housing stock. Have you made any analysis? In the coming years, 75,000 units, and also but the problem cannot be resolved, Secretary. I think Mr. Wong is talking about the increased number of applicants on the QPS. Yes, there is an increasing trend that the 18-year-olds tend to join the waiting list at the moment, and as Director mentioned just now, the LTHS steering committee also made this observation in this deliberation. So there is a recommendation that we should review on a regular basis the applicants under QPS to ensure that they are still eligible for PRH.
Can you accept Audit recommendation and take out those not eligible from the waiting list so that the 18 list could accurately reflect the housing needs in society? Well, that's exactly what we plan to do. Next, Mr. Gary Chen. No, nothing from you. Okay, Paul then. I think it was the permanent secretary who said this. If I could just pick up on that first, on what's something he said. Now, you're talking about the QPS. You say you will consider certain elements that you deduct points. Did you say something like if people have higher education, there will be deduction of points? Now, if that's the direction you're going, I'm worried the public may not support that. Permanent Secretary, can you clarify if that's your consideration?
Something we could look at. The whole point is the suggestion was made that we should look at some way to deduct points or disincentivize people to apply. So what I've said is that we're going to consider all options, one of which might be that. But let me assure you, one of the reasons that we're waiting for the outcome of the LTHS is to get feedback on this, to see what the public will be prepared to accept. And this will have to be considered and debated by the Housing Authority. This is not something we'll come up with on our own.
Could be looked at 就唔好啦，即係我諗should.
I don't think it should be could be looked at. I think you shouldn't look at it at all. 2.39. There is this point here. As at the 31st of March 2013, there are 111,528 QPS applicants. 96.8% have not moved at all. You see that, right, Secretary? Yes, that under the QPS, there are many relatively young applicants. And based on the current point system, it depends on when they started queuing, or if they are older, of course, they may have queued longer. And age is another factor for points scoring. So for those of an older age, there is a higher chance of them being given PRH. Well, the Secretary was not here just now. We talk about whether we could avoid inflating figures. Maybe we only start accepting applications from the age of 30, because before that it's just pointless wait. Now 2.45 in 1993. There was the then Management and Operations Committee, which introduced a revalidation check system. That is, every 2 years they would check the eligibility criteria. So they just check once, or they do it regularly. Secretary, well, I did not know why there was just one revalidation check at a time. Now, usually for the general waiting list, we do not do revalidation check, because usually if they wait for 3 years, then it's about their turn, and then we'll look at the latest position. Under the QPS, we do not have any revalidation check. Now, whether we should introduce it, yes, that's one possibility we're considering. 2.46, it says that in year 2000, the waiting list shortened, so the revalidation process was cancelled. That was history. So you did something right at one point, but then you stopped it. Now, more than a decade later, you haven't resumed the practice. Because I'm glad to hear that from the Secretary that you would consider revalidation. So are you going to do it regularly, or how are you going to do it? What's your plan? Secretary? Now, for applicants under the QPS, we're talking about revalidation checks of these applicants, and in the LTHS steering committee discussion, it was to be a regular check. Earlier on, we talked about the inflated figures in the waiting list. The Secretary left for another meeting just now. I said this at least. Now, when we talk about constitutional reform, we say we have to do gatekeeping at various points. So I'm using the same example. So shouldn't we put more resources in gatekeeping at the early stage? What's your view, Mr. Secretary? Do you need to check with your colleagues what's been answered? Well, actually, when I was here at a meeting at the earlier part, I did respond to this point. I did explain to members why we believe that there should be a full review of all the information declared at the time when the application is considered for first offer. Because during the wait, circumstances could have changed. I'm talking about those on the general waiting list. Now, we do spot checks, but it's not a revalidation check system, so the nature is different. But in any case, the average, we have an AWT target for the first housing offer, so that's why we believe that people don't have to wait too long, and then we'll do a full verification of the eligibility. Paul? Well, Secretary, I'm sure you take the plane often when there's a long line waiting to get on board. The airline may send colleagues to get to the middle of the queue to check your passport, to see whether you're in the right queue and so on. So this is just common sense that is in the system. If we could manage the queue properly and proactively, then we would be able to tell people in the wrong queue to leave early. And we could deal with the queue earlier before the queue reaches the counter. But why can't you do more here? Secretary, well, we have to look at two separate queues. One is the QPS. For the QPS, as I said, we would consider a periodic revalidation check approach. For the general waiting list, that is elderly applicants and family applicants, the AWT target, of course, is based on what we've explained earlier in terms of the definition, that is from registration to the first housing offer. The average is 3 years. Now, if we do the revalidation every year in terms of cost, in terms of disturbance to the applicants, we have to balance that as well. But if we do it every 2 or 3 years, well, if we are able to keep to our average waiting time, by the time there's a first offer, there would be a full verification, and that serves a similar purpose to that of revalidation. Well, I think I'm done here with this part. Mr. Leung Sing, before Mr. Speaks, the Secretary mentioned a number of times the LTHS. What is the relationship between the Housing Authority and the LTHS Steering Committee? The Housing Authority has its own powers, right? You are not led by the LTHS Steering Committee, right? So can you please explain to us what are the responsibilities of the HA? And as for the instructions from the Steering Committee on LTHS, do you follow the instructions? Is it because they don't give instructions and HA doesn't do anything? Or maybe what the LTHS suggests may not align with the HA policies, and what do you do? Can you please explain? Mr. Chairman, under the Housing Ordinance, the Housing Authority has the full powers to deal with allocation and management of public housing resources. So the HA is responsible for making policies. But then the Steering Committee on LTHS has also made a number of recommendations on how we can make use of public housing resources in a fair and efficient manner. Is it the case that the Housing Authority is not able to see what is fair and efficient? No. The Housing Authority could, of course, deal with relevant issues anytime. It's just that it so happens. It's like the Housing Authority doesn't have to wait for the audit report to deal with issues. But since there's an audit report, since we are aware of the report, and we are also aware of the fact that the Steering Committee on LTHS is proceeding with a consultation. So on the part of the government, in terms of making a response, we should wait. Now, but what I see is that the Housing Authority has been around for many years, although there's now the Steering Committee on LTHS. You don't have to wait till the Steering Committee on LTHS to say something. And you could already follow the recommendations of the audit, right? Well, for the various audit recommendations, the Housing Department has already responded. Is in the report. So there are certain things that have to be dealt with by the HA because they involve policy. So when would the HA, what would the HA do and what would the LTHS Steering Committee do would be, we have to put that down in the report. I think for all the audit recommendations agreed to by the Director of Housing, if there is need to go to the Housing Authority, these points will certainly be referred to the Housing Authority. Thank you. Mr. Leung Sing and Mr. Raymond Wong. Still on the same part, right? We're on part 3, are we not? No, we're still on part 2. In that case, I have no further questions on part 2 then. Mr. Raymond Wong, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that just now the Secretary mentioned the Housing Authority. You have tried to pass the buck to the LTHS Steering Committee and the Housing Authority, but of course we know the Secretary is the Chairman of the Steering Committee and the Director of Housing is the Deputy Secretary. So it's still executive-led. It's all to do with you. Don't try to pass the buck. And then, of course, when it gets to the Housing Department level, we have the executive arm. So the alienation responsibilities is clear. There's no way you can pass the buck around. So I think it's pointless to mention whether it should be for the Steering Committee or the Housing Authority, because you are the chairman of the Housing Authority and he's the deputy chairman. So it's all about you. You're responsible for making the decisions and the actual implementation. Now, dealing with applications 2.56. Well, I want to talk about other issues too, but we're running out of time, so let's go to para 2.56 about processing applications. There are a total of 17 declaration forms in use for PRH applications, but these declaration forms are not attached to or distributed with the application form. They can only be downloaded from the HD's website. And then in the information for applicants, or the bilingual video clip informing applicants how to fill in the application form, there is no mention or inclusion of the declaration forms. And it does not explain that the failure to submit the right declaration forms is reason leading to a large number of frozen cases. So, Secretary, can you tell us whether there is any room for improvement here? Mr. Raymond Wong? Ms. Wong already answered the question earlier. Mr. Secretary, yes, it's true, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Wong did answer this point earlier. Oh, please let Ms. Wong answer the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the 17 declaration forms in Appendix. They are listed out in Appendix E. And if you refer to them, you see that it's not the case that every applicant has to complete all 17 declaration forms. It depends on the applicant's own circumstances. That's why if we attach all 17 declaration forms to the application form, then the application would be rather bulky. But in the light of the audit recommendations, we'll see how we could revise the information for applicants, or how we could amend the video clip, so applicants will know how to fill in the application form and which declaration form they may have to fill in based on their own circumstances. So we'll try to see what improvement we can make in this respect. 2.60, processing of applications, Table 10. In the past 5 years, case accepted for registration, and applications vetted by the RCSU, successful application 47%, but for rejected cases 39% because of complete information. Now this is not an occasional case, and it seems that the housing department has turned a blind eye to this situation. There is such a high rate of returned applications. Perhaps there's something wrong with the information for applicants or the bilingual video clip. Perhaps there's not enough information, or the information is misleading. If you could address this issue early, you could have saved time in the vetting process, and you will save resources. Table 11 is even more ridiculous. Some applicants have to resubmit forms 4 times or more. And there are many who have to resubmit the applications once or twice. That obviously then there is something wrong with the information for applicants. So how are you going to address that, Ms. Wong? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are to reject or return an application. Reject means that person is not eligible. Return means that there is not sufficient information, or some required information is missing. So every time, now what we do now is that when we reject or return the application, there's always a covering letter to give the reasons why the application is rejected, or what documents are missing and they have to be submitted. Now, in the light of the audit recommendations, after 2 returns, the document still not complete, then we will call the applicant to find out whether there's any misunderstanding or miscommunication, and we would like to make improvements in this area. Now, as I mentioned, for the information for applicants and the video clip, we'll see what improvements could be made so that people better understand the whole work process. Well, the Secretary has already promised to do so this morning, because in para 2.80, the Housing Department said it could provide more guidelines and consider revising the information for applicants. Now, with para 2.63, the cases checked randomly by the audit, all cases involve more than 7 years. But then the Housing Department say the AWT is 2.7 years. So already for these cases, it took so long. So what are you talking about? You know, those officials responsible, have you ever shown any respect to applicants? Or are you saying that these are low-rent housing, and people think those applying for PRH, those located PRH, this is faith of them by the government, or they should just shut up, they shouldn't be so picky. But some people may have this kind of ideas, but of course we don't look at it that way. Yes, these are public resources, but for those in need, they should be given the housing as long as they're eligible. Otherwise, there's no need to do vetting. You don't have PRH. I can apply for PRH when I have too little assets, when I'm no longer electrical member. In theory, I could be eligible. Don't say that I'm not eligible. I could be eligible, right, Secretary? Mr. Raymond Wong, yes, please, your question. Have you ever shown any respect to these people, or you just regard them as those who come and apply? Well, that's how it is. Have you ever considered their feelings? Can you ask about the system? Well, that's the system, 2.63, para 2.63. Secretary, please. Mr. Chairman, exactly, because we do not just handle the applications casually. We want to make sure those with genuine needs are given fair allocation of housing resources. That's why we have to look at their income proof and other documents of proof. And if they do not submit all the right documents, the HRD staff have to be careful in handling cases. They have to be fair. They're doing the right thing. But in terms of dissemination of information, can we do a better job? I've asked the HD to follow up on that. Putting people first. Or no, I'm saying that you should respect people. There's only just one case. For the other cases, you never even called the applicants. So what are you trying to do? Now, these are cases picked up randomly by the audit. So I think you really must improve the situation. They have promised to improve, Mr. Wong. Okay, then. 2.75, para 2.75. I'm going very quickly. 2.75 from 2008 to 9 to 2012 to 13. The average case investigation time referred from the RCSU and the LU, the time has increased significantly by 43%, from 109 to 156 days, and also from 72% from 96 to 165 days. In 2012 to 13, the average case investigation time was more than 5 months. That means exceeding the agreed time frame of 3 months. Can the Housing Department explain why? Director of Housing, or perhaps Mr. Liu could take the question. Thank you. I explained earlier, the main reason is for individual applicants, when they received a request for an interview, they did not show up at the appointed time, or they did not submit the information. Of course, the audit report has asked us to look into why there's a case, why there is such long delay, and how come we didn't deal with it. And that's true, because in the past 2 months, the central team has devoted more resources to tackling abuse of public housing resources, but that's no excuse. If we do not do a good job here, we have a new guideline. We ask colleagues to complete the cases in 3 months. If they can't do so, they have to report to the central team, the manager or the assistant manager. They have to apply for extension of time, and then we will provide a little more money to make sure we could complete the in-depth investigation within 3 months. But what guarantee could you give? You're just saying so now.
This morning, they answered the question that when the case goes back to the central team, they will further handle it and they will put in more manpower. But what guarantee do we have? Well, now the time is over 100 days, more than 3 months. For some cases, 4 to 5 months. And now you say that you will put in more resources. Can you give me a timetable as to when these will be resolved? We think that that is the approach of the administration. When the ball's back in their court, we don't hear about it again. The PAC will follow up, because we will not allow them to not do anything. But this will only aggravate the figure for the frozen cases. We have already completed all the outstanding cases. I have issued a new guideline that for those cases of which the investigation time has exceeded the pledges, it will be followed up by the central team. It's already put in place. You have already dealt with the outstanding cases, yes, but there will be more cases coming in, and you will have to guarantee that for the new cases, they will have to be handled within 3 months' time. When an applicant makes an application, if the applicant refused to turn up in an interview, is it the case that, well, I'll give you 3 months' time, if you don't turn up, I will cancel your case? No, that is not the way. But I can assure members that we are confident that for the majority of reasonable cases, we will be able to complete them in 3 months' time. Mr. Raymond Wong, I've finished. Mr. Alan Leung is the last one, and Paul, I'll draw the line. It's only a short question. When I was listening to the secretary, I heard that the use of elapsed time while waiting, or the actual waiting time, is not very practical, because you don't know how many people have to wait for the second or the third offering, because there are a number of factors involved. If you are not going to change the definition of the average waiting time, which is 3 years, will you every year announce the actual waiting time? That's my first question. And in order to enhance transparency, when the information is announced, would you make available information related to the rejection of the second or third housing offer as to the reasons, so that efficiency can be improved, and we don't have to and it will be easier for us to explain to the applicants. And about the non-elderly 1P person applicant is 8,800. If you include the 5% MPF contribution, 9,347. For a university graduate, I believe that they will make more than $9,347 if they find a decent job. For paragraph 5, it says if there are changes in the family circumstances, the notification, the housing authority will be notified. Otherwise, the application may be cancelled. That is on the application form of Part 7.5. Will you consider strictly enforcing point 5 of Part 7? Or, to look at it from another way, give them incentive to take the initiative to declare any changes to the housing authority. Say, for example, it may result in the deduction of points or whatever. In this way, it will reduce your administrative cost and also reflect better the waiting time. Secretary. The second part of the question, we will review the QPS, whether it's the calculation of points or how to conduct the review of the regular revalidation. The Housing Department and the Housing Authority would like to take into account reasonableness and the need of the people in whatever measures they devise. When it comes to calculation of time, we currently adopt the definition of the HA. I agree that more information should be made available. Every year, in relation to long waiting cases, we conduct analysis. we may consider releasing further information when it comes to the actual time. No more question. Last, Paul, some housekeeping matter. Kenneth, perhaps we will deal with part 3 next time. Yes. Well, when we finish with Paul, we will finish part 2. A follow-up. An answer from the administration. Well, the information is not very user-friendly to applicants. Say, for example, reminders and forms. I'd like to get more information. In part 3, we will deal with difficulties of prosecution and the need to prove that it is a deliberate contravention. We're not aiming at punishing the applicants, but when it comes to use of public resources, we have to be fair to those who are waiting. So we have to take up prosecution or law enforcement actions. In relation to the applicants on the list, they may not have to take an oath, but they have to make a declaration. Is that sufficient a warning or reminder to the applicants on the application form? Secretary. Well, for the form, I will leave it for the department to supplement. Yes, we agree that the forms will have to be reviewed to ensure that there is sufficient warning or reminders to facilitate our prosecution or law enforcement action. Who is to take the question? Perhaps I will defer to Mr. Lee about the application form. On the application form, in the 4.42, there is a lot of information asking for the net asset and a lot of other information. Well, it says in detail what has to be detailed and what has to be supported by document. There are 17 declaration forms. Out of these 17 declaration forms, there is a paragraph added in response to what the audit said, because they have to knowingly supply false information. We have added the element. So over the years, that wasn't done. And you only know that you should do so after the audit has pointed this out. Ms. Wong. The applicant is aware that furnishing false information will lead to prosecution, but we need to highlight this on each form. So the form now says furnishing false information may result in a prosecution. We just take one more step. Paragraph 2.63. Mr. Raymond Wong mentioned this as well. In relation to certain applicants, they will have to go back the third or fourth time, and there will be a further delay of another year. It will take a year for them from registration to receiving the the blue form. In Table 11, paragraph 2.63b, except for one case, no telephone contact had been made with the applicants. The director mentioned this. He said that more would be done. My question is, when will you adopt a more personal approach, that is, to contact them directly over a bureaucratic approach? And when it comes to declaration of information, well, it did not occur to you that there should be some written warning or reminder. You understood that they should know. From what you know about that, there is no written warning or reminder. But when it comes to a personal touch, to remind them that, well, there is insufficient information, please give me the information. You did not do that. Isn't it putting the cart before the horse? Ms. Wong? The declaration form has to be signed. Well, in response to the suggestion of the audit, we now put it in a bigger font that furnishing false information will lead to a prosecution. Well, in the past, was there any written warning or reminder? We've always told them that on the declaration they have to sign, and during application they are told that they should not furnish false information, because during random checks, if that is identified, they will be prosecuted. So the applicants knows. And as to how we can add a personal touch to it, every day we deal with a large number of applications. So it's impossible for us to call them in the first instance to talk to them. And whether it is rejection or acceptance, we will send them a letter to give them a reason. Say, for example, for rejection, because of this reason, or your application is still outstanding because certain information is missing, and we will tick against the box of the information missing. And when it happens 2 times in a row, we will call them to talk to them. With limited resources, it is very difficult for us to call them in the first instance. So what we do is that if it happens two times in a row, we will call them to contact them. This is an improvement measure. I understand the merit of a written record. We'll say, for example, a letter stating what is wrong. Well, there is sufficient safeguard in the correspondence, but when you have to wait for a letter to be received or sent, you don't exactly know what it's about. Some people may not be very adept in dealing with correspondence. If you call them, it will save several days of agony, and it will be simplified, and then it will spare them the pain to have to of having to write you a letter. When it comes to resources, a telephone call is not just about saying one sentence. If necessary, we will spend time to talk to the applicant. And what we say to the applicant is the same as the content of the letter. Say, for example, what information is missing. We would like to take the middle course, given the limited resources. That's why we put in an improvement measure. And if we had more resources, would we have done more? Yes, that may be the case, but now resources is limited. We need to prioritize, and that's why we have this improvement measure. Director.
I have a little bit of concern about too many conversations. You need to make sure that people are very accurately made aware of what is necessary for them to produce. The best way is have that in writing. Then there can be no dispute. If you have a telephone call, it can be more or less formal, but it needs to be recorded to be able to protect staff. So the bureaucracy grows. So it's appropriate for us to use a written form so that it's properly recorded what it is they need to do. We are always prepared to follow up, to remind them, but it must be based on the information in the written form. So I don't think we want to get overdone on this telephone conversation.
My question was that, well, that is your main consideration, the record. But can you strike a balance to do better instead of just having everything recorded on paper? We've been talking about improving the system so that resources will not be wasted. I fully understand where you come from, but just strike a balance so that it can be done better. 2.73. The random checks. Well, I previously said that the 120-180 ratio should be swapped, so that there will be early identification of problematic applications, so that they will be taken off. Well, the random check, on the face of it, it seems to be fair, but when it comes to efficiency, if it's a suspicious case, then you conduct checks. The success rate may be higher, the efficiency may be higher. Ms. Wong? There are two types of random checks. One is at the outset. The other one is at the stage of housing offer. If it's at the outset for the 300 cases, we have done certain things already at the 300 cases. The merit of computer selection is that it's fair. There won't be any complaints that why you pick me, why not the person next to me. We have to take that into account. About the ratio, should the 120 be newly registered and 180 in the process of flat allocation? We will consider whether we need to adjust the ratio. Thank you. We have completed part 2. On Thursday at 3:30. Thursday 3:30. Sorry, Thursday 2:30. Today is 3:30, Thursday 2:30. We will start from part 3. Secretary, can you give me an answer? 2.51a. Well, there are lots of recommendations from the LTHS steering committee, and so did the audit. Can you give us a timetable? When these recommendations will be followed up on and when they will be taken up? Secretary. There are recommendations from the audit report, and they are agreed by the director. And I said, since that there is an LTHS consultation, and there are a number of recommendations as to a more efficient use of public resources, and that's why we say that we will take that into account. But this is also about allocation of resources. We want you to give us a timetable about implementation. You know that there are a lot of clearance sheets. We need to follow them up. That's why I asked you for a timetable for implementation of the recommendations of the audit. In relation to all the recommendations of the audit, we will refer them to the Housing Authority for follow-up. Well, you have accepted their recommendations, yes? But the decisions will have to be made by the HA. But that's not my question. Yes. Well, about the specific implementation, say, for example, review of the QPS, will give us a timetable because we have to put that in the report. For specific measures, we'll have to go through the HA meeting, so it will take time. So you tell us what are the short-term measures to be implemented and what are not such measures, because we have to put that in the report. Give us the information. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to compile the report. Meeting agenda.
3點半我哋繼續另外一個 Chapter 1。得咁嘅。